Hey, Raj, thank you so much for joining me on a well designed business today.
Hi, Luan. It's good to see you again. Happy New Year, and it's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this conversation, Raj. I when you did my photography last fall of 2023 and we started sharing them. We shared them at first in my Facebook group, and then of course they started coming out on the website and in the
Mhm.
social and everything. I just was so impressed with your process, and having had professional shots taken several times in the last 8 years, this was a very special and unique experience. And
Mhm.
so I'm excited to share you and your services and your talents with all of my friends. But before we get into your process and why I loved it so much, just give us the quick rundown on your mission and how you show up in the world and how what photography services you do. What does it mean to you? You're not just your garden variety photographer here.
Thank you, Luan. So, I run Series A Photography, which is a personal branding photography business. I work primarily with speakers, high-end speakers who are looking to either create their first speaker brand or level up their speaker brand. And my goal as a photographer is, of course, to get beautiful pictures, but more importantly, is for you to feel safe in expressing yourself fully on camera. For most of us, being in front of a camera is frightening, awkward, some variant thereof. And most of my clients, when they come in, are either like mildly annoyed to completely terrified at the idea of being in front of a camera. And when I walk them through my process of them feeling safe, I love seeing the transformation that comes out in front of the camera and the transformation that they take out into the world of seeing themselves better, loving themselves better. That, in a way, I would call that my mission, because that's the most fulfilling part of my job.
Yeah. And it comes so through in working with you. It really does. I mean, you could say that what I really want is for the people I work with to feel safe and to be able to express themselves. But those could be words like on the side of a website. Like,
Mhm.
probably most personal branding photographers would say some version of that as their goal. But I think actually delivering that at a very meaningful level, which is what you do, I think is something that is I think it separates you. I do. I think it
Thank you.
separates you. It's not just words, it's action. It
Thank
really
you.
is. Yeah, it's cool. And I know that you have previously specialized in speakers, but I think, sir, now you are going to have to expand to the interior design market.
All
I'm just
right, all
saying.
right. I'm open to being convinced.
I'm just saying. I mean, interior designers, need pictures constantly.
Yeah,
Like the website needs to be updated because it's all about style and image,
yeah,
right? Like they're not CPAs.
yeah.
So they can have the most beautiful photography, which they do with the many interior photographers that we've interviewed on the show. But if their lifestyle photography of them on their about page or their team or whatever is like dated and whatever, it's no worse than having, a Tuscan, golden harvest, golden avocado green living room there. It's like, what are you doing? That's from 30 years ago. Like, so I think to your point, it's branding photography. So it's very important for the design industry to keep their personal branding images up to date as well.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. I think in addition to photos being dated, what often happens in branding is a lot of like cookie cutter kind of stuff where
Yeah.
everyone just looks the same. Like everyone wants the same kinds of images and the
Yeah.
same kinds of like emotions or vibes or lack thereof.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I see that not as a limitation, but uh, as an opportunity to change the game, as an opportunity to like show something different about yourself, show something more real.
Yeah.
Because in order to be a good photographer, a good designer, a good artist or creative of any kind, you are probably bringing something of your real self into your work. I
Right.
mean, I can't just, I could try and be an interior designer by reading a bunch of books and being like, all right, we're just going to do these colors and these things, but it's not going to be great if I don't bring something of my own taste or character of who
Right.
I am. And so there's an opportunity to also show that in the rest of your brand, in your photos and everything else that you do.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's so funny that you say like to really find the expression of yourself, right? It's I when I had headshots taken a few years ago during COVID, there's this one shot, and most of my listeners with us today will probably recognize the shot. It's like I got a white blazer on, I have a green polka dot button down, and I had during COVID let my hair start to go a little salt and pepper gray, and I had a bob. I did the whole
Yeah.
thing. And the funny thing is I really like that picture of myself.
Mhm.
I really like it. I looked at that and I thought, banging, like this is professional. And I felt like it expressed me. And what was so funny was no one has ever said a negative word about it. It is objectively a good
Yeah.
photograph of me, right? But one time, I guess it was about a year ago now, you and I had already met. So I already knew that we were going to work together.
Mhm.
Um, but I had done a live presentation to a group that I didn't know that well. And I didn't know the organizers before. Like they knew of me through the podcast, but I had not had the opportunity to meet them. And at the end of the day, we're standing there and we're like, kind of like, oh, what a great day and blah, 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 like this, right? And I had spent most of the day getting to know the organizers.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, one of the organizers felt comfortable enough to say to me, and I got to tell you, that headshot of yours, like, no. And I was like, wait, what? Because now I'm like, where is this coming from? We're not talking about my headshots, right?
Yeah.
And she just said to me, she goes, that is so not you. She goes, when
Mhm.
you showed up here today and I experienced you and I look at that headshot, she's like, who is that? And I was just like, wow, that's wild. Like, because I was like, well, that's me being professional. And they're just like, no, it's not.
That's kind of the reaction I had when I first looked at your website, and I did not actually check out your website or anything until well after, we'd been acquainted in our public speaking program,
Yes.
where I'd seen you on stage several times. For context, for the audience, Luan and I met at Heroic Public Speaking. We were doing the speaking training over several months, and all of us got the chance to go up on stage and, practice bits and collect feedback from people. So I'd seen you several times on stage, and you have your personality, that everyone knows and loves. And that's the way I knew you.
Yeah.
So when we started talking about working together and I looked at your website, I was like, who is that? And again, these are not bad photos. No shade on the photographer there, but
right.
It just did not match with how I knew you.
And it was so funny because I never saw the disconnect in it. To me, it's like, well, there is that very serious part of my brain. Mm-hmm. There is. I'm a serious business person. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not, I'm not messing around here, folks. Like, I'm making money and I'm making moves. You know what I mean? And so I was like, yes, sometimes I show up like that. That's who I am. I get stuff done. And it's just funny. It's just funny, right? And so anyway, so I think it's interesting. So that is to me, when you see the photography now that's on my website, it's just like, oh, there's that crazy lady.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you went through a journey to like own that side of yourself, even that side of yourself that is the badass businesswoman, but shows up in the crazy lady, Luann way.
Well, right. What's interesting about that you say that is because I came to this old enough to trust a photographer. Like if I had come to, needing headshots and brand shots in my 30s or 40s, it might have been much different, right? Yeah. But by the time I came to this in my 50s, I was like, okay, this feels gross getting my picture taken, but like big girl panties, just get over it. Like literally, I remember saying that to myself. This is insane. This feels absolutely ridiculous, but you understand that if you don't switch the flip in your head of I feel uncomfortable and just own this, you're going to look even worse, and I really had to have a sit down with myself for like 5 seconds and go, why is it that you're nervous about doing these headshots? And I was like, well, because you don't want to look stupid. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, so are you going to guarantee you look stupid by being embarrassed in every shot, or are you just going to own it? Right. And that very first time I did headshots in like 2016, it was like a bang head moment. I was like, just keep coming, just put the imposter syndrome, the fear out of your head. Right. But the difference and the disconnect was that I didn't also look at the professional quote unquote shots and think it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that when you go to put yourself in print, yes, in real life, I'm a lunatic and I will, some of my truck driver personality will come out on my state. My Vinny Bag of Donuts comes out. Like it all comes out. But
Yeah.
like it never occurred to me that that same person should be on the website.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was not showing up as myself. I just thought I was showing you the serious side of myself, the take charge side of myself, the girl who gets the stuff done side of myself. And so it's a very interesting journey to learn. And if I hadn't had that one woman say that to me,
Mm-hmm.
I probably still would be like, I don't know, Raj, don't you think it should be serious? But with that in my brain,
Yeah.
and then the learning and the speaking to you and you giving me the confidence to be like, just come at me. Where is Luann? And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, and I think that goes into how I see personal branding. We often think of, the way out there personal branding is talked about as almost like a lot of people have this idea that branding is fake. And that
Right?
is true. That's the way many people do it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I am this person in my work or my business, but in order to be quote unquote professional, I have to create or show this completely different version of myself that nobody recognizes or nobody that I work with or am talking to recognizes. Whereas I would like to suggest that thinking of the idea of personal branding differently. I see personal brand as the relationship that you've created with your audience.
Mm.
Your brand is the relationship that you have created or you continue to create with your ideal audience. It's not for the whole world.
Right.
Not everybody will appreciate that. It's for a very specific audience. In your case, interior designers, in my case, speakers that will listen to you or who
Right.
your content is meant for. That's the relationship. And then branding photography from that perspective for me becomes, how do I capture that relationship you have? So if your relationship is based on your personality that shows up as your, Luann, or I just came up with the word Luanatic. So I want to capture the Luanatic personality. That is what branding is to me. Why would
Yeah.
I want to capture a completely different version of you that doesn't actually show up?
I know.
Right.
But I think what I want my colleagues to hear is I did not think
Yeah.
that I wasn't showing up. Like I never once
Yeah.
looked at any of those previous headshots and thought, this isn't me. Like there is a version of me that is those headshots. So
Yeah.
it didn't feel off. And the thing is, I guess it's having someone like yourself that has done the exploration and really has the rack of success of all the people that you've taken their shots and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is the difference. It's like, it's that where it's kind of like, you know what it is for me for like interior designers? It's as if you had a client
Mm-hmm.
who just consistently was trying to get you, guide you, whatever, to deliver a beautiful room, but that it doesn't have their personality in it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a model home.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with the room, but it doesn't actually reflect the personality of your client. And that's what you won't do. You won't just be like, these are beautiful shots of you, Lou. They are. You're like,
Yep.
no. I mean, I can't, the number of times that day you're like, nope, that's not your, come on back.
I
Who
love you
are
brought up that point because our self-image sometimes doesn't actually match how others see us,
Yeah.
or even the people we know, love, who know and love us, see us.
Right.
And this is true for how we look, like physically to others, as well as like how we want to be in our space, the interior design thing. Like I know, maybe you have, and sometimes it's like it's also like it brings out our inner aspirations.
Yes.
Like we feel like, oh, I need to look a certain way. I should look a certain way. My room should look a certain way. Like it should look like that fancy catalog that I saw in Dwell magazine.
Right.
Whereas
but meanwhile, I've got 16 dogs and I walk around in yoga
Exactly.
pants all day.
Exactly. Like if you told me, like, if There's no way, like, even if I've been to houses and done shoots in houses and homes that have been on the cover of Dwell magazine. I kid you not.
Yes.
I walk into them and I'm like, beautiful space. This would not be a space I could live in.
Right. Right.
Right. This
Right.
would not be my colors, my personality, how messy I am. I wouldn't know where to put any of my stuff.
Where do you
Like,
put the keys in this house? Right.
exactly. So it's not my personality. So even when I worked with an interior designer a few years ago, it was very like clear that something from a catalog wouldn't work.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
And
Magazine worthy isn't what you wanted. You wanted
right. And we
what
often
you and
see that
Andy.
ourselves that way too. We often have this idea that we should show up a certain way because it meets the standard of professional, but then you're just putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a situation that others don't recognize you. Whereas I feel like my approach to branding is very much just like I think many interior designers. Let us capture your personality in there because that is what your audience is showing up for.
Right, right. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the difference between capturing a beautiful photograph of you
Mhm.
and actually capturing you. And it's the difference between creating a beautiful room that could be anywhere or creating a room that's for that specific client.
Yeah, and now don't get me wrong. There is a value for photography that captures an ideal image. When I started out as a photographer several years ago, for a while I was doing more boudoir photography, which is often for many people a way of capturing a slightly more fantasy version of yourself.
Right.
Like, oh, I could look that way. I could be seen that way, right? And
Right.
it's not a way you'd show up all the time in everyday life, but
No.
there is value in that. It's a way to explore a different side of yourself. It's a way to gain confidence and all of that. But it's not what I think you should be doing in branding. Because
Right.
branding is for your audience.
Right.
You are serving your audience, you're serving your clients. You need to give them what the relationship that they want with you.
I love that because that just, whether it's boudoir photography or other genres, there's photography that's for us alone. That's for us, our family, whoever. And then branding photography, to your point, is to your relationship with your ideal client.
Exactly.
Love it. That's a very good clarification on that. I love that. So where do we want to go next? Do we want to talk about next your process? Do we want to talk about how you're also a sex therapist and how that impacts your photography? Like what bomb do we
I'm
want to
open
throw
to
in
it.
there?
Let's start with your experience. Why don't
Okay.
you use your experience working with me as the main kind of framework for this, and then we'll go into like nice little detours along the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I recall and I remember appreciating from the experience was there are multiple times throughout the process before you get to the photography session where you're meeting with you and they're meaningful discussions. That's what I remember. They're not like, hey, 2:00, it's, on September 10th. It's like, no, here, Lou, we're going to, you lay out the process. And it very much reminded me of the way interior designers approach their process with working with their clients. There's this discovery period of you discovering who we are as a subject and a person, but then you forcing us to do discovery.
Yeah.
So, right? And so you want to
So I remember that there were a couple of hiccups there. So the first step, is having a conversation. We had a lot of conversations during HPS and then afterwards about what we wanted, what the story was. And I understood got to understand what your journey is, what your previous experience with photography was, some of the stuff that you just talked about. And then the next step was creating a mood board. Now, remember that I gave you the instructions, and I know you've worked with Pinterest before and you've done different kinds of mood boards, but somehow you were stumped with this one. Do you remember?
Yes,
and we had to have an extra call for that and me walking. So talk to me about that. Like, why were you stumped there?
I think it's, listen, being completely honest, I think it was a combination of a few things. Number one, you have to know me. Like, I don't like details. And if I don't like details. And if I don't see the point of doing the detail, I'm not going to do it. Like me, I would have been like, okay, can somebody on my team create this mood board? Like, whatever. Just, he wants a mood board. He wants to know what
and I wasn't going to let you get away.
No, and so I was just like, whatever. All right. And so, but then to your point, look, I being completely honest, if you were a stranger to me and I knew I was paying, I am the type of client that will show back up and go, I'm not doing the mood board part. Like I'm
Hmm.
not like, and then I recognize once you explain to me the value of it, then if I agree, I will be like, oh, okay, I get it. But I could see if I didn't know you, just being like, yeah, I'm not doing the mood board part, like, skip it. And then you would have convinced me. I know you would have, and I would have done it. But I didn't take that approach because you're my friend
Hmm.
and because I know the work that you do. And I was like, okay, I don't get the reason for it, but Raj isn't just creating busy work. And so that's why I said to the second meeting, I was like, you gotta tell me why I need to do a mood board. And you gotta tell me how to do it because I don't know how to do it. Like, not like I
Right.
don't know how to click on Pinterest, but and that's when you explain. Do you want me to explain or you would
I would
explain?
like to hear you explain it in
Okay.
your words.
So this is what happened. At that moment, you were, and this is a year ago. So I'm recalling obviously what was the most impactful parts of the
Right.
conversation to me. You were saying, I know you a little. I need to know you more. And so I'm not looking for you to pick pictures of headshots.
Hmm.
That's, I'm wanting you to find things that represent you, that speak to you. And
Hmm.
I was like looking at you like, what? And and as you continued to talk, you were like it might be a quote or it might be a work of art. And I was like, "What?" And so at that moment, I thought, well, I could do that on Pinterest. To me, that was almost like creating like a quasi version of a vision board,
Hmm.
not so much a vision, but an existence board, like
Yeah,
who am I in
I
my
like that term.
brain, right? And so I still was kind of like, I don't see how that's going to help him do his job, but I could understand it and I trusted you. And so
Hmm.
then that's when I like mostly, and it was so funny because when we actually looked at it together, I realized that I used the same board that the other photographer had asked me to create 100 years ago. And every one was your corporate nonsense headshots. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, yeah, no, that's from 7 years ago. Oh, no, that's from 7 years ago. No, I don't really want that one. Well, maybe kind of that, right? But 90% of the shots that I had collected for the original mood board was so clear to me how they were so not me now.
Hmm.
Like not even I didn't even need someone to tell me they weren't me.
Right.
And so then I collected like, pictures of tigers, like, cause I I just identify with tigers. They're like my spirit animals, like,
Yeah.
rah, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then it's like quotes and different things. And I was like, at that point, I was just trusting process. So then when we got together in person, what was interesting was now we have the steps in between where you pick the place and get the studio and all of that. But
Hmm.
when we got together in person, after you had arranged for a makeup lady,
Hmm.
after she did my makeup, you just sat with me, with you and Emma, and you're like, okay, let's look through this mood board. Tell me what this means. What does this say to you? Blah, blah, blah. And it was just crazy because
Hmm.
you just, that was when it started to unfold for me that this is how he's actually getting to know
Hmm.
who I am in my core, not
Yeah.
who I look like I am.
Yeah. Let me tell you some of the origin story behind this process.
Okay.
So, as I said, when I first started out as a photographer, I was doing boudoir photography for a while, and then the pandemic I had decent business and portfolio there, and then the pandemic happened, and clearly, people were not doing shoots indoors for a bit. I mean, I wasn't for sure, but that also gave me a chance to reflect, and I realized that boudoir photography was not satisfying for me. And the reason it wasn't satisfying for me was I didn't like the way it was done. The idea in the genre that, there is an implicit idea that for a person, typically a woman, to look quote unquote sexy, there are only these few things you can do. You have to wear certain kinds of outfits. You have, typically lingerie or less, or you have to do certain sexy poses. And
Mm.
that's what makes someone sexy. And that I didn't believe that idea. That idea just did
Ah,
not land for me. Right?
right.
Like there are, 8 billion ways of being sexy. Every person
Right.
has their own way of expressing their sexual desire and in other aspects of themselves. So I took a break. A friend of mine asked me to do like a branding photo shoot because she was starting a business, and I did that. And I was like, I really enjoyed it. We did the shoot outdoors because it was still 2020. And I was like, oh, people have a very similar thing around confidence. Everyone wants to look confident. And there is this idea that in order to look confident, you have to dress a certain way, like wear suits or like do these certain poses, like power
Yep.
poses.
Chin
Similar
on
idea.
the
Yeah, you
fist
had
on
this
the
like,
chin,
yeah,
arms
exactly.
crossed.
And I was like, I don't want that. That's not satisfying. That doesn't feel real. So,
Hmm.
how do I figure out what your version of confidence is, or what your
Mm.
version of anything that you want in your shoot is? Like, because you have it in your head, you can tell me the words, but my interpretation of those words my visual interpretation is going to be different from yours.
Right.
Your version of confidence might actually be being in a boardroom with a suit. It might be in a beautiful home, like, telling people what to do, how to organize it. It might be
Right.
walking out in a beach. How do I know that? So that's where the idea of a mood board came about. I took like, I knew people did mood boards or vision boards, but I was like, what if this tool could be used in that way,
Mm.
where it's an intuitive process where I just say, let you be guided by your intuition to collect
Yeah.
pictures that just resonate with you in some way. And
Yep.
it took a few iterations to get that right, but it became this tool where I get to see what basically get a download of your subconscious brain.
Right. That's what it ended up being.
Yeah.
That was what was so crazy about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I get to see what your version of a badass businesswoman is. Like, when I see the tiger, I got to ask you, what does the tiger mean for you? A tiger can mean many different things. Maybe you like yellow and black as a color combination.
Right.
Maybe you like sharp things. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe you like cats.
Right. Right.
I
Like
need to
that,
know.
that is the truth of it.
Yeah.
Right. That is the truth of it. Like just the tiger isn't enough
Yeah.
because it could be 16 different descriptions of what a tiger says to a person.
Exactly. But it gives a starting point
Yeah.
for a conversation with my client to really understand how they see themselves, how they want to be seen in the world.
Yeah.
And that's the
And
purpose of it.
I remember the tiger conversation, like you were like, tell me about the tiger. What is the deal here? And what's so interesting is that I think it's a combination of having the picture
Mhm.
and the conversation together and the safetiness.
Yeah.
Like you create a safe environment where you're just like, all right, I'm really going to tell you what she means to me. Like she's my
Mhm.
goddess, like she is that inner voice there. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
I would never have guessed that,
Right.
right? About what the tiger means to you. And that's
Right.
completely valid, right? Because you have that interpretation. For me, a tiger is a fierce animal. Like, it's not
But so,
goddess.
and it's so
Yeah.
funny. I don't know if you remember me telling you this, but the thing about the tiger, and this could be true of other animals, I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's exclusive, but one of the other traits of the tiger in my mind's eye, I've never
Mhm.
met any tigers in real life, okay? But in my mind's eye, one of the huge characteristics in my mind and why I resonate is because the tiger is quiet. The
Mm.
tiger is quiet and the tiger will wait and the tiger will let you play your thing out. And if you play it all out and you resolve it, well, that's okay. I don't need to tell you how you might have gone wrong. You resolved it. It's good. I can stay back. The tiger can just observe.
Yeah.
But if the tiger needs to pounce, look out. I mean, my guests saw that at Luann Live. We had a situation at Luann Live with outsiders at our group, and I'm literally in just a cocktail conversation at a bar, like
Uh-huh.
with all the people that were at Luann Live, and I'm laughing and and I look and I see an outside guy who I'd already 1.5 hours before that ejected from my party
Whoa.
because it was 3 guys. They were drinking and they were just mooching on the party, and an hour and a half before they just pissed me off because they were there. But now I'm standing there with a group of women talking, and I happen to just look sideways and I see that guy, and he takes his hand and he rubs it down the back of one of my guests. Well, you want to see the tiger in real life? I'm like, boom. I just was like, get out. I walked away.
Yeah.
Get out, turn around, march, get out of here. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, the cops ended up coming. It was a thing. But I was just like, there's in that moment, I'm not 5'5" and 120 pounds. In that moment, I'm a freaking tiger. It's
Exactly.
nuts.
And imagine that, that story. I hope you share it more widely, but that's part of the relationship you have with your ideal client, with your
Yes,
audience.
yes. I
You
like,
have
yeah.
that fierce
I'm like, you are my
protectiveness around.
people. You are my
Exactly.
friends. You are in
So
my
do you
event.
think
I am
that,
not you.
that enhances the relationship you have with your audience, your community? Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Because now they get to see that side of you.
yeah. And
Right?
then they came to me,
Yeah.
Antonio, he came, John, the other, people there, once they saw what was going on, then they turned around and they defended me because of
Yeah.
course there I was picking a fight with a guy that was like 6'2" and about probably 60. And, then all of a sudden they were like, what are you exactly doing over there? And he's drunk, but I didn't care. I was out of my, like, bang. And that is that thing with the tiger. Like if it were any level of that was a Mach 10 moment. I was like, no. But if it had been a lesser moment like that tiger would have observed, would have been like, oh yeah, I'm having fun with you, but I'm watching over there. I'm watching and I am on watch. And I will be ready when it's necessary, but I will not create drama where it's not necessary. Because at the end of the day, the tiger is so strong that he doesn't have to putz with nonsense. He only has to show up. She only has to show up when she has to show up, but she will.
Yeah. So look, we are having this wonderful conversation about tigers and what that means to you. And I can't imagine a different way that this would have come out other than doing a mood board. Right.
No, it never would have.
Yeah.
It never would have. Right.
Exactly. And so even for your design community, I know that many of us, when we're doing design, planning process and stuff, we do vision boards or mood boards, but they tend to be very literal. They tend to be like collecting a bunch of headshots, right? It's like, all right, here is a furniture piece you want. Here is like something else. Here is a mid-century modern something, like all of that. But what if you could expand that idea of a mood board to collect something more about the client? Really as a way to understand how the client sees themselves and the world around them, so you can kind of get into their head and really give them something that they don't even know they want.
Right. That's the truth.
Right.
Like I never, like, to your point, would never come up in a conversation about photography. And it is very much my core, who I am. How would you have known it? You wouldn't have. And then throughout the day, you kept helping me tap into the different things. So we talk about the mood board and what does this mean to you and why this and then why this quote and why this and blah, 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 blah. And then, it was those moments where you lose your feet in front of the photographer. You're just like, all of a sudden you're like all about like who you are. You're like, you're self-conscious because I'm not an actress. I can't keep it on lock the whole day. Right.
Yeah.
But what was great was now you had an arsenal of things to just like click me back in. Like, hey, where's that quote? Where's that like, I will persist till I succeed. Where's that quote? I'm like, oh, you're like, feel it, think it. And I'm like, oh, there it is. Or where's that goddess tiger? I'm like, oh, here she is. Come on, look out.
Yes. Tell me more about that. Like me and Emma, who was assisting me in the session, we were doing all these things to like keep you in the moment. What were some of the things you experienced there?
Well, what I loved was within the first shot that we did, the standing shot, what I loved was that was tough and it was uncomfortable because it was the first time I'm doing photography like this. You're like, hey, just, tell me a story. I'm like, what? Like, I'm your audience. You're at a live speaking event. Tell me that, and you knew some of my stories from the HPS. So you're like, tell me this story, and it's weird. Like, you're just like, but like, two things happen. Emma was so good at being the audience, at not just be like, I'm just staring at you like a stand-in here and I'm the one who you're supposed to be looking at and talking. She was like on the journey with me in the conversation. And so that was really special to know that. And then something happened within the first, say, probably 7 or 8 minutes. See, and I'm all about evidence. I'm all about prove it to me. I'm all about like, if this is going to work, I got to know it's going to work. Because if I know
Mhm.
it's going to work, then I'll trust you and I'll keep following you. But
Yeah.
if I think it's nonsense, I'm gonna check out. I'm gonna like, I got time. I don't got time for this. And within the first 6 or 7 minutes, I started to say a part of a story, and I was about maybe 30 or 45 seconds into it. And I stopped and I went, "This isn't me talking." And she goes, "No, it's not you at all." And I was
Hmm.
like, "Oh my God." So now I know I have somebody in front of me who sees the difference between Luann acting her
Hmm.
speech and Luann giving her speech from her
Yes.
heart.
Yeah.
And like in that minute, I was like, "Emma, I'm in your hands for the rest of the day. Raj, you do your thing. You take the pictures. Me and Emma, we got," because like, and then I would like, all throughout the day, not like just placating me,
Mhm.
not going, "Oh no, it was good. Just do it again." You see, you could make me do it again by doing that, but I much more appreciate going, "Yeah, you weren't you there."
Yeah. So let
You
me
know?
tell you a little bit about what's happening in the behind the scenes here of this experience. So Emma and I are both trained as sex and relationship coaches, and the primary we trained in the same system. In fact, when she was in her very early training, I was her assigned mentor for a little bit. Uh,
Oh.
yeah. So I'm really proud of her. But now she's like, like taking all the advanced trainings and all that. Like she's amazing. But there are a couple of primary skills that a sex and relationship coach or any other kind of coach and therapist and people in that kind of profession, I would argue that even designers or any service providers need. The first one is what's called as attunement.
Hmm.
So attunement is, as the name sounds, is to be extremely attuned to the person in front of you, almost like you're reading their mind. You're not
Yeah.
actually reading their mind, but you are almost feeling, it's an extreme form of empathy. You're feeling what they're feeling. You can sense what's going through them through verbal and nonverbal cues. And you're also attuned to yourself and your own emotions that are coming up. So it's like a
Hmm.
combination of attuning to the person in front of you and attuning to yourself, which gives you the ability to, when you say something to me or when you're sitting there doing something, being like, all right, that person did something. I noticed that they did something. This is the emotion that's coming up for me. What does it all this mean? Can I articulate that? So it's a pretty complex skill set, but that's what
Hmm.
enabled her to be like, I saw Luan saying that sentence or that story. That landed for me in a certain way, and I'm feeling like something is off and this
Yeah,
is
I'm
not
feeling
what
like it's fake, or I'm feeling like
fake,
it's
and I am
forced,
able
or
to articulate that in a way
yes.
that makes sense to you, in a
Mm,
way that's of service to you. So
yes.
there is that whole kind of complex skill set, because that's what your client in a sex and relationship context, when they're coming to you for solving some kind of relationship issue they're facing with, they need to hear that from you.
Yes.
Most of us, we have no idea how we show up in a relationship with our partner, with our family members, with anyone else, right? We kind of have an idea of ourselves that, oh, this is who I am. I'm this kind of person, but we have no idea what our impact is on
Right.
someone else. Having somebody in front of you who can actually articulate your impact on others is like amazing skill. And that's like a huge part of what a relationship coach does.
Okay.
The second skill set that she brings, or someone trained like that brings, is helping you get into your body, get out of your head
Mm,
and get into your body.
yes.
Because early on, right after my training as a relationship coach, when I also started doing more headshots and portraits, what I realized is that the stuff that comes up for us in front of the camera is exactly the stuff that comes up for us in the bedroom,
Oh, whoa. Oh,
right?
whoa. That's nuts. That's nuts.
We get insecure, we get into our heads, start worrying about how we are looking, how we show
Yeah.
up, am I attractive enough, am I worthy enough, am I desirable enough, all of those insecurities
Gosh.
come, am I too fat, too thin, too this, too that, all of those things come up, all of those insecurities. Can I am I allowed to do certain things, am I allowed to ask for certain things?
Mm.
Feelings of safety, am I safe, like physically or psychologically, in this space,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for women, but I think for everyone. And
Right.
so,
Right.
depending on the same, feeling vulnerable, all of those things that come up for us in the context of relationships come up for us in front of the camera. So the skills that it takes, and a lot of it is what happens when that comes up for us is we get into our head. We
Yeah.
start intellectualizing, we start analyzing too much. We forget like who we are. And in both contexts, the big skill that a coach needs is to get you out of your head, back into your body, and then express yourself more authentically and vulnerably. And so
It's
that was what was
remarkable to
happening
hear
there.
it described, because
Yeah.
that was the experience of it, but to hear it described,
Mhm.
because that's exactly what would happen. It's like any time we were together the entire day, there might have been, I don't know, 8 or 10 times that I looked at Emma, I'm like, and she's like, yeah, nah, right. And that's exactly what's literally happening at that moment. You've
Mhm.
left your emotion, you've left your body, and you're thinking. It's almost like you're now watching yourself.
Yeah.
And as soon as you're watching yourself, to your point, you're judging yourself. Your
Yeah.
confidence is falling by the wayside. You're asking all those crazy questions. And the thing is, in the moment with branding photography, it's not like you're exploring all that internally. You
Mhm.
just know you've just left the room. You've just
Yeah.
started to watch the room and
Mhm.
started to judge yourself,
Yeah.
actually. Do
Mhm.
I look dumb here? You know what I mean? And that is the consistent. And what I would tell you is, like I mentioned to you in the beginning, if I had because I came to this older,
Mhm.
without your skill set and without the benefit of this attunement working with yourself and Emma towards me, I literally just powered through. I was like, stop it. Stop it. You
Mhm.
have to just be in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that you're not always going to wait until you're 50 something years old and you've got a little like maturity behind you. Sometimes, you're a designer and you need branding shots at 30.
Yeah.
And like, how do you do that? And by the way, you could be 50 and not be able to do it. That just happened to be my journey, that I was
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to just get in a different thing,
Yeah.
but you still slip out. And I think the difference with you guys was it was a snap back in. And I
Mhm.
think, to your point, hearing the skill set of attunement and this extreme empathy, I think that's why you were able to just right on track. Like, hey, where are you? Come back, get back in your head, get out of your head, get back in your body. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was like a shorthand. And I do think that we have to come to it trusting you. We have
Mhm.
to come to it with a certain level of trust, of expectation of you being trustworthy, whether it's you as a photographer or someone else. But what I will say is, my experience is that immediately the trust is starts to come back.
Yeah.
It's like it starts to get earned, is really what I should say. It's like, I want to trust you because I can't do this if I can't
Mhm.
trust you,
Yeah.
right? I can't do this if I can't feel safe.
Mhm.
But your entire process is consistently setting the tone
Yeah.
for that safety. And
Exactly.
this sounds like kind of dramatic. I mean, it sounds like, when I'm thinking about, like, oh, we're talking about photography here. But I think at the end of the day, anyone that has had any kind of branding photography taken, I think you can know that this isn't really over dramatizing it. It is
Mhm.
difficult to
Yeah.
stand there for 6 or 7 hours and have your photograph taken, and to keep trying to be who you are in your core and not
Yeah.
who you think you should be.
Yeah.
And it really is so important in this day and age, especially for interior designers. I know that you said you often, you work with speakers, but it's the same.
Yeah.
Like, an interior designer is such an intimate professional,
Exactly.
right? Like, it's not like hiring a CPA,
Mhm.
right? It's like, I have to, we say all the time that when they see you on Instagram, if they're intrigued and they go to your website and there's a big disconnect,
Mhm.
then it starts to just unconsciously say, I don't know,
Yeah.
doesn't seem right. So I don't think we can overstate how valuable it is to be able to have this process be as good
Totally.
as it can be, right?
Totally. It's important that, as an interior designer, you kind of learn to express yourself
Mm,
and be comfortable, or at least learn to get that vulnerable, because that is also a critical part of building that trust with your clients.
hmm
You have a very intimate relationship with your clients. You're going into their literal homes or like business or place of work, and you're redesigning their space. That is a very intimate relationship.
Yeah.
And in that, if to do that good job, you have to build trust with your client,
Right.
so they can express who they are and what
Mm.
they really want, even if they are ashamed of it, even if they're not sure, even if they're like, does this look dumb? If I
Yeah.
want this kind of furniture here, like, or this kind of
Right.
thing here, like,
Right.
there is a lot of stuff that comes up for them. There are, I know that when my partner Andy and I hired an interior designer, that was the first in 2019. That was the first time in our life where we could actually afford to do it, and we wanted to. And there was so much kind of like shame and fears, like, oh, when we're talking, it's like, oh, like, is this question going to make us look dumb or like lower class or poor or like whatever?
Wow.
Right. And so there's stuff
So the
that
two
comes
of
up.
you were discussing things that you would then eventually discuss with the designer, and you
Right.
had actual out loud conversations. Is this going to make us look dumb to ask this, or make us to
Yes.
look poor to ask? That's
Right.
insane. I
Right.
bet every designer went, wait, what? Right? Like,
Yeah.
we're
So
not
I'll give you an
thinking that
example.
you're
I'll give you
thinking
another
that.
story of another of my clients who is a literal CPA. So this is like,
I always
I
pick on
actually think that
CPAs.
CPA is also an intimate
I
relationship.
know, it's so true. I
Yeah,
shouldn't
because
pick
it's
on them.
money. It's
Yes,
money.
and you got to be real, or you're not going to
Yeah.
get good advice, right?
I have a client who's a CPA and financial consultant, mostly for women-run businesses. And we were having coffee one day, and she was complaining about like all these badass business women she works with, except they came to her for like tax advice or whatever advice when their businesses were already on fire. Like their
Mm,
businesses were like, owing like $100,000 in taxes or all of that stuff. And she
mm,
was like, I don't understand why they don't come to me sooner. Like
mm.
these problems are solvable. Like I could set up a system. And like she was ranting about it. And I was like, hey, Trisha, that's her name. Trisha, have you thought about how to handle shame in your clients? And she was like, what? So another tool that we have to use in sex and relationship coaching or around any taboo subject. The most taboo subjects in the world are sex, money, and death.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's shame because we don't talk about them. We think we're the only one having those problems and so on. So what was happening, my guess was what was happening to these clients is that her clients were that they were these badass business women who felt like they should be able to do everything on their own. And then they tried and tried. And then when everything was on fire, they were like, oh, like I
I
need help.
have to get help now. Oh
Right.
my God, that's so insightful, Raj. That's so
Exactly.
insightful.
Thank you.
It's probably very true.
Yes. So in the sex and relationship world, and psychology world, there are different techniques to address shame. Some of which could be like one is empathy, being sharing your own story of how you had that same problem.
Mm,
One is blaming society for it and the social messaging we get. It's
mm.
called joining, or making a common enemy and being like, it's that thing's problem, right? So the idea is that you show the person in front of you who's feeling that shame, that they're not the only one
Mm.
feeling it. Right. And so there are various techniques for it. Now I explained that to Trisha and I was like, now let's see how we can translate that to money.
Yeah.
Right. Like shame around money, because that's a thing that many, many people have, right? That feel
Mhm.
like they should know more or should know the right thing. But most of us don't grow up being taught the right lessons around either sex or money.
Right. You're
Right.
so right.
Right. And so I explained that to her. We kind of helped her. And then she started doing that. And like that changed her business.
Wow.
Because now as a CPA, she could not only go and like look at people's books, but have a conversation around like, hey, like what, why didn't you come earlier? Or like, what's coming up for you when we talk about this thing and address that. So CPA is a very intimate relationship, and so is designer.
Yes.
So again, when we worked with our designer, like she was really good at that point, and we didn't quite realize this how good she was at actually talking about things, noticing when things were making us like bringing up shame around like both Auntie and I, I grew up in India, he grew up in Texas, in fairly low income families. We didn't have a concept of interior design then.
Right. Right.
Right, like it was basically like like a very like middle class family just trying to survive and whatever, right? And so there was a lot of shame at like, oh, now we're like, hiring an interior designer that seems so fancy and
Oh, and who do we
uppity.
think we are? Do we
We
deserve
think
it?
who are, or like, do we deserve it? Are we worth it?
Yes.
Or
What
like,
will
what
our
if,
friends and family think? Who do,
yeah,
we're so
or what if
highfalutin
the
now.
designer thinks we are stupid because we don't like her particular choice of furniture or whatever, like she picked, and we want something different. Like, there's all that stuff that comes up around
Wow.
class and social status and all of that. And as an interior designer, I think if you really want that extra relationship with your client, you need to be aware of how to handle and have those conversations.
So true. So true. Oh my goodness. And it's funny because we have our friend here to the show, the designer CPA. His name is Peter Lang. And I always just say he's like the CPA who's not like a CPA, like, 'cause
Mhm.
he's just so approachable. But the reality is as you were talking, it occurred to me, it's because you're not embarrassed. He makes it so that he's like, I get it. You're an incredibly talented, creative being. I can't put a room together. Let me help you figure out your finances. Like, there
Yeah,
is no shame in that. There's no
exactly.
wall that's like, how come you don't know this? Right. And
Yeah,
so unknowingly, and maybe he's thought it through. I've had a million conversations with him. He's never identified it in those words, but that's exactly what he's delivering. He's
yeah.
delivering a shame-free process to get your
Exactly.
work done.
Exactly. And that is exactly what I try to do and Emma tried to do in our work, because that is also the work we do as relationship coaches. It's
Yeah.
like creating a shame-free environment, a judgment-free environment where you get to play with things. We
Yes.
did shots where they didn't work very well.
Right. Right.
Yeah, we
Right.
tried out things and we like tried out outfits, poses, whatever, and we were like, this is not working. Let's do something else.
Yes.
And because there was no judgment around it, there was room to play and experiment. And I
That
think
was the
that's what we
truth.
need.
That's the twofold thing there, is that there was no judgment around it. It did not feel like, oh, I'm a bad subject because that outfit and that pose didn't work. Like, it was
Yeah.
literally play, like you said. And also the trust of you guys as an expert, because there's nothing worse than an expert that's like, yeah, I mean, like, I like it. Do you like it? And you're all like, you're looking at it. Like, there were
Mm,
times where you were like, hey, come look at this. And you're like, I'm not loving this. You want to like pass on this? And I would look at it, be like, yeah, you're right. Like, that
mhm.
looks dumb. I look stupid like
No.
that. I can't pull that off. Right. Whereas sometimes experts think that their role is to just be the cheerleader throughout the thing, as opposed to the actual guide, right?
Right.
The actual
I
guide.
love how you said that. Like, yeah, your role as an expert, so as a photographer, like some photographers approach it as, when their work as I am the artist and this is all about my vision and like whatever
Right.
fancy thing. That's not the way I approach it in the context of branding. I
Right.
have other shoots I do when I want to capture my own vision, but for that, I'm working with a friend or hiring a model or something like
Right.
that. But with my
Right.
clients, because I'm a service provider to my clients, just like interior designers, my job is to bring their vision to life and be the guide for that, which means that I need to show up in a real way. I need to show
Mm-hmm.
up, first of all, prioritizing their vision above my own or interpretation of it. And I also need to give them real feedback and create a
Yes.
space where that is welcome.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's the truth. Oh my goodness. I just leave it to say the experience was just top shelf from beginning to end. It's the results, the photographs are terrific. We love them. We get good reactions to them. My website feels so much more like the crazy lunatic that I am. Lunatic
Great.
that I am.
You're welcome to steal that word and use it. I'm very proud of that.
That's it.
Lunatic.
That's it. So, but I appreciate you, and I know that I could talk to you for another hour and just about the experience. But I cannot recommend you enough, and I know that you will do branding photography for designers, because I've told you you have to
All
when they
right.
call
All
you have
right.
to answer.
All right. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Raj, one other thing before we go. Would you talk to me about, I know that I've read through, different things associated with you and our quick conversations at HPS, that you have I don't know if it's a lesson or a theory about inclusivity in photography, and it probably is going to extend a lesson to us here in design. Would you share your thoughts on that?
Ah, I
But
think
yes,
one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit more is we talked about the creating the space and the environment that makes you feel safe, but also how I approach photography itself.
okay.
I think that's kind of important to say. Um, Photography is an art form that's been around for about 200 years now, and for the longest time, for the first 150 years or so, the only people who could afford a camera were people who were wealthy, mostly, globally seeing, like wealthy white men.
Mm,
It's only in the last 50 years that we have had cheaper cameras come out and now phones come out. So now everyone can, do photography. But for the longest time, you had to be somebody to have, you had to have a significant investment or amount of money to spare to do it, even as a hobby or as a profession.
okay.
What means is that so much of the way we do photography is still influenced by the tastes and desires of a very small section of population,
Oh, interesting.
right? And so if you take that further, it's like think about what we consider as beautiful in photos or who we consider as beautiful in photos. Right? It's certain kinds of bodies, mostly, young, athletic, pretty, like all of those things. Right? And photos of bodies often shown in some kind of like slightly sexualized or more sexualized context. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is when I have my first conversations with clients, that stuff often comes up in implicit ways. It's like, I'm too old for photos.
Mm,
I am too, like, I have too, I weigh too much. I have, I don't know, I can't wear certain kinds of clothes. I don't know how to pose.
mm,
All of those things I hear and more in my
mm,
first conversations with clients. And if you look
mm,
at my website, most of my clients tend to be women, and they tend to be women above 40 in their 40s, 50s, 60s, even in their 70s.
mm.
Right. So there's aging, menopause, like all kinds of
All
physical
the
things
things.
come up for them. And we have to have conversations about that. Now, what I have to remind them and what I would like to remind you for as a couple of things. One is that you are not doing these photos to please that particular audience. You're not
Mm,
doing these photos to like look sexy in front of wealthy white men or whatever, like, that audience
right.
might be. But that's often the conditioning that is the purpose of photos that we have. You are doing your photos for a conversation with your ideal client who is a very different person who is there for a very different reason. The relationship that you have with your client is very different. It's very unique. So you have to think about the purpose of your photos, like what will help you convey that or enhance that relationship. They're not here for you to look sexy and like young and pretty or whatever. They're there because you have something to teach them. You have something to help them. You are there to solve a problem. So focus on that,
Mm.
right? And when we focus on that, the whole idea of posing changes. Like I'm going to ask you, like, did we do any standard beauty poses
No,
in our
right.
photo? Did I make you like weirdly contort your body into like this is a pose that's like
Right.
that
Put your hip that way and your knee
yeah.
that way and your
Did
elbow that way. Right.
I did not do that. I don't think I did that even once with you.
No,
It was
no.
all about what is the emotion you want to express? What is the emotion you want your audience to feel in this photo?
Yes.
And then how does your body and your face express that emotion?
Oh my God, that's so true.
Right? So I imagine that many of you in the audience, you are interior designers and you may have some of these come up about these concerns come up. It's like, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not young enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough. I'm not whatever. I can't pose. Put that aside. Think about what does your audience need from you? What do they need to see about you? What do they need to feel from your brand? And when you start thinking about that, that will clarify a lot of stuff about the poses
Mm.
and the appearance, because they are not here for whether you look perfect or not.
Right.
They are here to learn from you. They're here to like, uh, you to solve some problem that they're facing. So focus on that.
So what I'm hearing is that there is this wildly burnt into our DNA wiring here
Mhm.
that whether we consciously or subconsciously, it's not uncommon for us to have this really deep inside thought that this picture is going to be judged against versus what we think of as beautiful photography. Like,
Right.
so whether it comes from Shape magazine or it comes from whatever, like what we think of as traditional, quote unquote, beautiful photography. I would argue with you that that is probably very true. It's
Mhm.
not like somebody at my age is walking in thinking I'm going up against J-Lo for the next spread of whatever magazine, but in your mind, you carry all that baggage in.
Yes.
Like, even, and to your point, I'm not consciously walking in going, I need to look sexy, beautiful, this and that and the other thing. But I think what you're saying is that it's hard to, if you don't analyze it, it's hard to believe and for you to understand that it's living in there, that
Yeah.
you've got this built
Mhm.
up in your mind of, glamour photography, for another word. And whoa. And yeah, that's not your target audience. And the idea of this isn't to look, this, that, or the other thing, whatever the words are, right?
Yep. Yep.
It's like, and your underlying, well, not even your main focus advice on that is to stay attached to who you are. Like for me, my audience is like 85% women,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not shooting for a man. Like I'm not. Like that's what you're saying. There's no
Yeah.
men here. Stop. The 20 that look whatever. You know what I mean? It's like I'm shooting for my girlfriends.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, and I just also want to say, when you kept saying, what's the feeling? That was what you were doing throughout the day. Like you were like, what's the feeling, Lou, when you are talking with a designer one-on-one and he or she is really expressing a hard challenge in their business? Like, tell Emma what you say to them. And
Mm.
I like, and then I would just, and like what happens is I would literally put myself
Yeah.
in a spot where I could remember a one-on-one conversation. And then I pretended Emma was that designer and I spoke to her.
Yep.
And then you're capturing my face when in that moment, my face is more soft. It is more understanding. It is more open. But
Yeah.
then, you're like, tell me when they piss you off because they won't charge their fees. I'm like, oh, well, you got an hour or you're five days. Let's go. And then here comes the goddess tiger coming out, right?
Yeah. And I think we spent a few moments on this one photo trying to capture your expression when a client says something ridiculous. And you're
Yes.
trying to like not yell at them. And remember, like it was again that like, how do you express that feeling in your own way? It took a
Yes.
few tries, but then you came up with an expression that was just like, yes, that nailed it. But it
Right.
was you kind of tapped into what that
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a key like it's the yeah, but girl. Like, oh, this is the greatest advice in the world, but it won't work for me because my business is different. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you're right. You're right. Okay.
Yeah.
It won't work for you, sweetie. I get that. You're right. You're like solid business principles for all of time. But that's all right. You don't try it. Don't you do it.
Yeah. So exactly right. That is completely correct. It's all about every moment, every photo, and we learned that in our public speaking class too. Like it
Yes.
was called playing actions.
Yes.
Everything you say on stage in your speech needs to be intentional about what you want to make your audience feel with
Yeah.
that. There
Yeah.
is no point telling a story or anything if you don't know why you're saying it.
Right.
Right. It's
Right.
the same thing with photos. Like, yes, you can take. I see a lot of branding photos where it's like all like the same expression or the same kind of like, in 5 different outfits. It's like, what are you trying to tell me with this?
That's
Right?
so true. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that's so true. It's like anytime I've done a branding photography session, it is it's okay, let's get 10 outfits. But literally, my face is the same smile in every one. It's like, and we know when we hit a good smile and we hit a fake smile, that we've always talked
Yeah.
about. And the photographers I've worked with have always been good to like, yeah, that's a fake smile. But I just hit me. You're right. We don't capture different emotions. We don't capture inspiration. We don't capture like you're out of your mind emotion. And we don't
Yeah.
capture that fierce, like, I've got you emotion.
Yeah.
Holy crow. That's another aha.
Yeah. So if you're a designer working with clients, like maybe to make your branding shoot about giving an idea to the client about the holistic experience of working with you. What are
Yeah.
all the different things they're going to see about you? All the different
Yeah.
sides of you, whether it's like the happy smiley stuff, which is considered the standard thing in photography. I don't know when it just became the thing that every photo has to be a smiling one. But it became a thing at some point. That side is, yes, you're going to smile and laugh a lot, I'm sure. But then they're
Yes.
also going to see some other sides of you. They're going to see a thoughtful and contemplative side. They're going to see an compassionate side. They're going to see a frustrated side. Why
Yeah.
not show them all of it? So when they walk into an experience with you, they know what they're getting.
I love it. Oh my gosh. So good. So good. Really so good. So freaking
Thanks.
good. All right, my friend, we will put your contact information in the show notes and all the things. And of course, you can go to my website and my Instagram to see, the work that we've just discussed here for the last hour. And of course, you got to hit up his website to see some of the beautiful work that he's done with other people. Thank you so much, Raj, for being here.
Thank you so much, Luan. This is such a fun conversation. I think we can keep going for hours on this, that, but we'll spare your audience. Anyway, well, I'm going to consider working with interior designers too. So hit me
I
up.
love it.
I'm happy to have a conversation. You can find my contact information in the show notes of the website, and have a wonderful day, y'all.